This is episode 64 of Utah in the Weeds. Welcome, everybody. My name's Chris Holifield.
And I'm Tim Pickett, medical cannabis expert, apparently recognized, like we talked about last week, as City Weekly's best of state.
And you are. I don't care what you say, Tim.
We're doing good things for a lot of people, so that's great. I'm excited about this conversation, though. Somebody we've been trying to get a hold of and nail down, Gardner from Curaleaf.
Finally, somebody from Curaleaf representing on Utah in the Weeds, because this is a pharmacy we haven't really talked a whole lot about on the show.
No, and we haven't yet talked to anybody from a national company, a big company. You know, there's a little more kind of red tape to get somebody like that on the show, making sure that Curaleaf's okay with it. But they have a good system down there, and they've been around since August of last year. They've been open. And this was a good conversation. Greg's a very interesting guy. He has an interesting story of how he got into cannabis, and you're going to have to listen to the end to find out the answer.
Because who would have guessed, hey, I'm going to go to school to be a pharmacist, and then now he's a pharmacist at a cannabis pharmacy in Lehi, of all places.
That's right.
But what else is going on here with UtahMarijuana.org, Tim? What do you got going on?
We're going to start doing webinars every other week. And next week, I'm going to do a webinar next Wednesday night on how to get a medical card in Utah. I think we talk a lot, Chris, you and I, to people who are already in the industry or patients who already know how to do this. And we still run into patients every day that just don't know that they qualify, don't know it's legal. And so we're going to go all the way back to the beginning and start.
You have to do it, man. You have to do it every so often. So how can they find that at UtahMarijuana?
UtahMarijuana.org. And if you follow us on social, Instagram,
all that will be right there.
It'll all be right there.
And I want to say this again. I'm going to say this on every episode. We are always looking for guests on the podcast. If you are a patient, whatever, if you're involved in the industry, we would love to bring you on the podcast, have you share your story, reach out to Tim or myself, and we'd love to set something up.
Absolutely.
So anyway, let's get into this conversation with Greg, though. This was a good one. I learned a lot in this episode, and hopefully you will too. So
enjoy.
Let's get into it. Let's talk about, where does your relationship with cannabis start? Where would you like it to start, I guess, for the conversation?
Take us back.
Yeah, you got it. So I kind of... graduating high school, I kind of had a passion to do something medical health related. My mom was a nurse, and then she taught an English and a medical English course in high school. So I kind of had a passion there. I had a neighbor who was a pharmacist who introduced me to pharmacy. So I was like, this is a pretty cool career. So I got my pharmacy technician license when I graduated high school. I worked at a Target for a number of years. And I said, this is something I think I'd like to pursue. So I decided to apply to pharmacy school programs. I did want to go out of state. As much as I love Utah, I was, kind of ready for a change.
You grew up here?
I did. Yep. Grew up, LDS, did, mission work. So I went out of the country for a couple of years, came back, and, I said, hey, I really enjoyed my time out of Utah, but I don't know that I want to settle down in Utah coming back. And so... yeah, so met my wife. We got married just before pharmacy school started, but I was like, what? Let's I want to look for somewhere different. So I looked at the University of Colorado, which is out in Denver, and I got excited to go there because one, they have mountains. I'm a big snowboarder. I like to do outdoor things, and so it seemed kind of like home, but being in a different environment. So up to this point, I have, no cannabis experience, no relation.
Never used cannabis?
Yeah,
nothing?
Never.
Not in your life?
Nope.
Okay.
Zero. Yeah.
His mom's listening. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, but, I had friends that did. I had friends that were, for regular users, and, I probably had some prejudgments toward them, because that's kind of how I was raised, to... so I'm a big believer on you just do the best with the information that you have. So I didn't know anything about cannabis other than, it was not allowed. But yeah, so, I applied to pharmacy school, got in at Denver. And so when you move there, go to Colorado for the first time and, just driving down the main highway, you can smell it.
Oh, sure.
And you're like, okay.
How long ago? What was the date approximately?
So 2015.
So right after legalization. 2014, right, was when they legalized
when Colorado legalized?
Yeah.
And now it's... Okay.
Yep. So it's
a new world.
Yeah. So we're going out to Denver, and again, kind kind of, again, just blown away because I'm like, hey, this is what I thought would be similar to Utah as far as, outdoor activities. But the diversity that's out in Denver was amazing. The amount of, people, differences of opinion. So these were all awesome things. They made it very clear when we were, applying to pharmacy school out there. They said, hey, if you're coming out here to use, weed, that's a no-go.
Yeah. Did they test you before you went to pharmacy school?
I don't think they did any so we did
testing?
it. Yeah, we actually did drug testing at least once a year.
In your school, yeah.
Yeah, in schooling.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wait,
because I know for PA school, I had to take a drug test to get in.
Yeah.
What a waste of money.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did annual drug tests. But yeah, so that was very, very upfront. Pharmacy school, that was off limits. No cannabis use while we were there.
No big deal for you, though, remember?
Yeah,
right?
again.
You grew up here, you're not into it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
In the defense of the pharmacy, though, maybe it was to check more for pill popping. It wasn't necessarily just to check for cannabis, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's other drugs. I mean, it's testing.
Yeah, I mean,
okay, I didn't want to paint a bad picture.
I guess so.
I didn't want to paint a bad
I mean, this
picture.
is only a year after legalization in Colorado. I mean, we're still.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got to figure they're like, the rest of Colorado can do what they want. Mm-hmm. We're in real medicine.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We don't want this.
Well, what's interesting, what's actually pretty cool, and this is, so I didn't know if we were going to do anything, cannabis related in coursework, and we did. Our assistant dean at the school, she actually kind of hosted and did about a week-long program where we discussed cannabis and how it works and the endocannabinoid system. We looked at different studies and so that was kind of my first introduction to cannabis as medicine rather than, just people getting high or something, that I had no experience with, but I was really interested. So I kind of took it upon myself as I was doing rotations and working is, in Colorado, it's recreational, no medical providers are, part of it, but it was really cool to get to talk to patients, just say, hey, do you use cannabis? And if so, let's talk about what your medication regimen that you're also using, how those might interact with each other or how you can, get different effects or, just things like that. So that was kind of my first introduction to talking to people about cannabis. At one of the pharmacies I was at, they had just got a shipment of, hemp product or CBD oils. And so I got to talk to patients about that. So I did a little bit of research on some of these products. And
this research was on your own, right? This wasn't like part of your work. You're kind of like, I'm just kind of curious what's going on.
And the research was pretty mild. I mean, it was just, learning about, CBD and a little bit about how it affects the body and, and again, the company was trying to sell the CBD product, and so it was more based on that, specific product. But yeah, so I did have an introduction to at least how cannabis works in the body, and as a pharmaceutical. And what's interesting is when our class graduated, our associate dean, she also left. She took a position out in San Diego. But she kind of said something as she was leaving that kind of left an impression on me, and she talked about. Because we focus so much on evidence-based medicine, what's the best studies for, and kind of making that our path. And she said, while we focus so much on evidence-based medicine, don't forget about, patients, medicinal-based evidence, so talking about patient experiences, and those matter. And so that was kind of the first, way or, thing that I was told that was like, hey, it's not all about what's the scientific
studies and the dosing of the pill and the side effects and the number needed to treat these
absolutely.
These things we learn in school.
Yep, absolutely. So, and that made an impression on me because again, that's what we had just talked about for 4 years during the program. And then I realized, maybe there is more to medicine than just, the best practice, the standard. And so during my 4th year, we were kind of deciding if we wanted to stay in Colorado or, what our next steps would be. And, while I think I'm in my 3rd year is when, Prop 2 here in Utah had kind of passed and got some pushback. So I didn't really know what the status of cannabis in Utah would be. But we decided to come back home. I had some kids out there, and so we, I've still got family here. So
you had kids in Colorado.
Oh yeah, my wife and I. We've got 2 little kids. So I think 2 and 4 now.
Sure.
But yeah, so they were little, and we wanted to be near family. Utah's a good place to live as far as things that we enjoyed, and we wanted to bring some of the things that we had learned in school and culture-wise, some things that we could take from Colorado and see if we can bring that back here to Utah. So we did. So we came back to Utah, and again, up to this point, I didn't really understand that a pharmacist was going to be kind of the one who ran a shop at a medical cannabis pharmacy. And so, but yeah, as I was, about to graduate, I started to see, different job postings for cannabis pharmacists. And, that really, really like got me thinking that, I love talking to patients about cannabis, and I had no idea, again, this was going to be a pharmacist opportunity for me. So, so I applied, I started looking at different job postings, and I kind of made that like my goal. I had done retail pharmacy for, about the last 8 years or so.
Okay.
But yeah, but I wanted to do something different. I didn't love working for the chains. I didn't love working for CVS now, that took over Target. I didn't love that. I was interested, in like independent pharmacies, compounding medicines, being able to basically take a subset of population that, doesn't have a one-size-fits-all medicine and be able to make something unique for them. So that was always kind of a passion of mine, and cannabis kind of fits that bill, having a medicine that's different, but people are excited about, people want to take, people are looking for something different. And so, so that was kind of my introduction on, getting into the cannabis industry here in Utah. Thrilled that, that they wanted pharmacists to be involved, because that was something that I could use, some of my resources and education on and help patients out.
Now, have you been with Curaleaf since the beginning?
Yes.
So, well, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were hired before they even opened, right?
Correct. So they opened their first week of like official doors open to patients was the last week of August. They had an official grand opening the second week of October. So I got hired on, I think, like the second week of August. I was originally hired on as a part-time pharmacist, 20 to 30 hours a week. And so I was splitting that time as well as working at another independent pharmacy, doing, kind of part-time at both. But I really started to really feel like I was exceeding at the cannabis stuff. I love talking to patients. I love to get their experiences on what was working for them, what wasn't working for them. And really just like seeing a patient come in and be excited about their medication was new. People don't come in and buy their blood pressure medicine and be like, yes, I'm so excited about this.
So awesome. I'm so excited.
Give me that metformin.
Yes.
That's going to make me feel so much better.
Yes.
I don't know, there's some medication.
Yeah, plus you get a lot more opportunity to talk to patients and have conversations with patients.
Yeah.
Whereas in the retail pharmacy, it's a very square conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Very transactional.
I'll always remember a conversation I had with a diabetic patient, new to their their insulin prescription that they were going to use. And I spent probably 15 minutes because I had just done a course on it in school. I was all pumped up, excited to go. So I spent 15 minutes with them talking about how to use insulin, how to do their injections and all that. And then as soon as they left, patient was excited, and my boss comes over. He's like, "You can't take that long with a patient. Too long." I was like, "What do you mean?" I
hear that all the time about doctor. You probably see that yourself.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, in medicine, you're paid by a lot of times. You're paid by the RVUs, revenue value units,
right?
Which is the faster you go, the more of those you can accumulate.
Yeah,
and so the better off it is. In pharmacy, you've got a lot of people to see, a lot of transactions to go through. Is that like Curaleaf? What is Curaleaf? What is their view on this whole thing? They're a huge multi-state company, international now.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
They bought that huge European cannabis company.
Correct. Yeah. So they're going to be global, which is pretty cool. I've actually thought, if Utah doesn't work out, it's like, find me a way to, get over into Spain or get into Israel or something, something like that might be pretty cool. But so I loved, like I said, I loved working for smaller businesses, independent. And so Curaleaf didn't necessarily fit the bill as far as a small company, but they did fit the, kind of the bill as far as, I'm still helping patients in a way that's unique. And they've been very receptive because every state's individual. Every state has their own, legal requirements for being open. And so Curaleaf is very amenable to, whatever the state requirements are, they will, kind of work around those. And so we've had a lot of leeway since being open. When we were first started, we had, I think, maybe 4 or 5 agents and, again, the head pharmacist and 3 part-time pharmacists. And it's grown tremendously. So one thing that we've done down at Curaleaf is We don't do appointment-based for new patients that come in. We do all walk-in, and so we have to kind of staff accordingly. Sometimes we'll have, no new patients coming in. Background, all new patients coming in do, have to have kind of a first initial consult with a pharmacist. So sometimes we'll have no new patients come in for a couple hours, and, pharmacists, we still check off orders, make sure they're compliant with the provider's recommendations. We check them every single time. But, if 5 new patients show up at once, we want to be staffed, to not have to turn anybody away.
Where is Curaleaf? I mean, is it right off of I-15 there in Lehi, or where's Curaleaf
I think it's right.
located?
Yeah, it's right off there it's in the old Del Taco. Right?
Yep.
Okay. I know where that is. Okay, it's one of the few pharmacies in Utah. Well, I guess I haven't been to any of the ones down south yet, but that I haven't visited. I need to come visit.
Yeah, you guys ought to come by.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet setup.
Yeah,
it's really great. So it's
not a huge pharmacy, right? But how many people do you guys see down there per day? I mean, you seeing a couple hundred people a day?
Usually we will average between, 170 and 210 patients a day, which,
kidding.
so it's pretty good foot traffic. So, and it usually gets busier as the, day goes on,
as the week goes on. It seems like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you're busier, which was interesting to me to find. I mean, it would make sense in a recreational state, but not necessarily in a medical state, but still there's a mix of what we would call adult medical use, right?
Yeah.
It's easier to use that type of adult medicine on the weekend,
right?
I would say. Right?
I'd rather use that than, get trashed and wake up with a bad hangover
for sure.
or something,
Absolutely.
But
so talk to me a little bit about I'm just really curious about this, how you grow up in Utah, you go on a mission. Where did you go, by the way?
Guatemala.
Oh, cool. Okay, so you go to Guatemala, you come home, you go to pharmacy school, you make it all the way through there, and then you become an expert on cannabis. What's that like for your family? How do you thread that needle? Your kids are a little too young to really understand that yet.
Yeah.
But your wife's not.
Yeah. Actually, my wife loves it. She's not a user of cannabis, but she is a pretty big advocate for just helping people so she's a mental health professional. She works in school psychology. And so I actually get to talk to her about, one of the qualifying conditions in Utah is autism. So she asked me, she's like, well, how is this working for your patients who have autism? And, that's one of my favorite conversations to have is, anytime a patient with autism comes in, just take a minute to talk with them and say, hey, how is this working for you? Why is it working for you? And then I, get to talk with her. So she loves it. She loves that, that we're supporting, this industry. My parents, that live here nearby, it was a different conversation at first. They still always are, prodding, saying, hey, keep your foot in, regular pharmacy too. But it kind of took, so that neighbor that we had
right?
that was, that was a pharmacist.
Careful with that communications degree over there.
Yeah. So, so that it kind of took, with my parents, it was, they were excited that I had a job. They were really excited to see me kind of thriving. But again, with a little asterisk on it. But it kind of took them, having their neighbor who's, a religious leader and the pharmacist, when they told him, and he's like, oh no, he's like, that's going to be an awesome job for him. They're like, okay, it's an awesome job for you.
Right. Yep. Now, okay, we're on board.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's kind of been how that conversation's gone. But yeah, no, it's, generally have pretty good support from everybody. And initially, not knowing, much about cannabis, I, had a little bit of a tendency to not sure how people would react when I told them that I'm a cannabis pharmacist. That has completely changed. I tell everybody that I can that this is my gig and that I love it. And more often than not, when you tell somebody that you're like, hey, I work with cannabis, when you think is normally gonna be like, oh, shame on you, really turns out to be like, oh, tell me more. Yeah. This is really cool. Any pharmacist that I've talked to, they're always like a little bit of almost like a jealousy,
I want to come work where you are.
Yeah, all the people are, like you said, all the people are happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't have very many jobs where people come in and they get happier, and it's 99 out of 100 are happier when they leave than when they showed up. That's a good deal.
Yeah. No, it's great.
I have a question on the pharmacy part. So we were talking about Curaleaf and even how they expanded worldwide now and they're all over. One thing I hear from people is here in Utah is they give the whole pharmacist thing. Oh, that's such a waste to have in the dispensaries and this and that. But I mean, does Curaleaf uses pharmacists in all their locations, right?
Not out of state. Nope.
No, no. I thought they
do.
They do in some.
I know. I've talked to Stuart Wilcox, their business development, VP, and they like that model.
Yeah. For some reason, I thought
they do kind of like the medical. They like that medical vibe, right? They believe in that. But they're out of where are they out of? I think Georgia.
Up north. So I think they're out of this is gonna sound bad, Maryland, but I gotta double check that one. But yeah, they're northeast coast.
We'll say that.
You got it. You got it. But they do. I think they do like that medical model. But they only have the one pharmacy here, and they didn't get a grow license.
Correct.
But they're so knowledgeable. Every interaction that I've had with anybody with Curaleaf, they're just so knowledgeable about the national system. I mean, they just have their system dialed. They're not struggling to open the pharmacy, on time. They're not struggling for the money to make things happen.
Yeah.
I mean, they just seem like they've got their shit together.
I think they do a pretty good job. I know that they've got pharmacists in at least 5 states out of the 20 that they're in or so. Because I kind of have a communication with all of them. We, have a little, LinkedIn group or something that we'll, get on and chat periodically. And it's as far as a company to work for, they've been good. And they're responsive to, questions. They're, like you said, they have, as far as like finances and stuff go, that doesn't usually seem to be a concern. And so we can, when product's available to get, they can usually get it in.
Just because to me it seems like a good idea to have a pharmacist available at the pharmacies, in my opinion. Because
it's
I've been
made
to
more sense to me too after originally not being so sure that the pharmacist was a good idea, but it's. Like, it really is helpful having somebody there on the medical
side. Questions all the time, man.
Yeah, who knows about the interaction between medications and what else the patient is taking and can further that discussion, because a lot of times we don't have, we spend a good amount of time with our patients, but we don't get into all of their medication list all of the time. We're talking about, there's so much to learn, right? We're just talking about dosing, how to feel comfortable experimenting with it, which I'm sure you're doing a lot of too.
Sure.
But talk to us about that consultation. Like, what does that normally look like when a patient comes in?
Yeah. So there's usually a subset of questions that we'll ask as a new patient comes in. The nice thing is that we kind of do a triage of like a wait list. So when they first check in, we know if they're a new patient coming in. So again, all patients will pull up on the EVS, we'll pull up to see if they've purchased elsewhere or if they're, again, completely new to the program. And then we'll look, for any provider notes, uploaded medication lists, any basically whatever information we can find on the patient.
Do people actually upload medication lists?
Some providers do. I think the law or the rules changed a little bit where if they didn't put any recommendation, drop down menu things, they had to upload a medication list. And so we used to see that more, but they took that requirement away. So now a lot of times we're just seeing, drop down menu, and what we can sell or how much would be too much to purchase,
Are there a lot of patients that come in with restrictions on purchasing?
It's kind of a double-sided question. Yes, in the fact that sometimes it's intentionally restricted on how much you can purchase, which and usually that's very clear. So when we see in the notes that says patient, where the law says you can get 4 ounces of flour, your provider asks that you can stay under 1 ounce of flour. So we'll abide by that. The tricky one is when providers that don't have as much experience, with the EVS system, they'll choose a drop-down menu and put nothing else. They'll put no information, anything that says, what forms the patient can get. They're restricted to that one item. And a lot of times that's unintentional from the provider's end. So that's where a lot of our phone calls to providers will be, just, hey, this is kind of what the state has asked us, how they asked us to interpret these recommendations. Right,
because you're stuck. For listeners, when I go into the EVS system to make a recommendation for a patient, you fill out the last 4 of the social, the name, that sort of stuff, and you hit okay. I'm gonna recommend this patient be able to use cannabis. You then have to go to a separate page and make a recommendation, a dosing recommendation is what they call it. The truth is it's more of a purchasing limit than a dosing recommendation for the most part.
Yeah.
But the top form field is all of the different 7 types of delivery methods, and you can only choose one in that form. So,
Correct.
You're limited. And if you didn't know what you were doing, which none of us did in the beginning, right? You just
It's gotten a lot better.
pick one. You pick one. Well, shoot, I'm gonna pick raw cannabis flower, and then there's a text box, and you've got to type in what you want, and the next text box is either milligrams or grams. So, I mean, we have QMPs that we train, and they have no idea, right? Well, it's 28 grams per ounce. Do I write 2,800 milligrams? Well, no, because the flour is only 20%, but then that's making a simple thing complicated.
Right.
Right? Like we all three understand, well, it's 28 grams per ounce. That's okay. Just put 28 grams as needed, 30 days, write some notes. But to get to the point where you learned that, it takes a long time.
Yeah. I mean, we're, I think 10 months in, and it's finally seeming like, it's getting easier and easier and things look more and more, accurate.
But how many new patients a day do you see that have incorrect dosing?
Most of the time, rarely now.
Okay,
Yeah,
rarely.
most of the time it's rare. Usually when we'll look and see who the QMP is, and if it's not a name we recognize, that's kind of the first flag. It's like, okay, let's go, do a little bit more.
What do you do with those QMPs that don't understand or they're new? Do you just immediately you kind of have a protocol? Okay, here's what we've got to do.
So first we'll communicate with the patient. We'll say, hey, based on how your QMP put in your recommendation, it would restrict you to this kind of purchase. Tell me more about your conversation with the QMP. Was this intentional or was it potentially unintentional? If the patient's like, oh no, my QMP said just to get whatever, we'll call over to the QMP, let them know. And usually, I'll just invite them to come to the store so they can kind of see the process. And at that time, I would do some education. If they're, if they don't want to come in, or if they just want to know on the phone, I'll usually let them know on the phone as well. But
here's what to put in the. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's what to put.
Yep. Pretty much.
Put in the notes per pharmacist recommendations.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing. All of this it's a little frustrating because it's all just like technicalities, and it'll go away at some point. The state's talked about revamping the EVS system, so there's just like 3 check boxes. Like, I do want to restrict my patient to this forms. I don't want to restrict my patient to these forms or something. So that's going to happen at some point soon, but we'll see.
I'm curious if there are any qualifying conditions that you think should be a qualifying condition in Utah. Especially as you've gotten more and more familiar with cannabis.
It's tough. We do have a lot of patients. We have a whole spectrum of patients, most commonly qualifying with chronic pain. But because cannabis is so multifaceted, it touches on so many areas. Patients are using it for sleep or anxiety or depression, so these are qualifying conditions that I think are treatable with cannabis, and patients are definitely using for
the depression and anxiety and stuff. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, so they're using cannabis for those conditions. I would say pretty successfully. They're not qualifying conditions because they lack scientific journals and evidence to make them qualifying conditions. As
you think so, though?
Well.
You think only the 14 qualifying conditions in Utah are the only
evidence?
Yeah, the only ones with the evidence.
It depends.
Glaucoma, right? Glaucoma is not a qualifying condition
or
in Utah.
An anxiety is a qualifying condition in other states, but it's not one here.
I'm just curious, your personal, if there was anything that you saw that you were like, gosh, why isn't this qualifying condition?
Do people come in with pain and then they say, look, I really just want to sleep better?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't sleep be a qualifying condition?
Yeah. Legislators, lawmakers, I think there's, my understanding, there's a board of medical providers, and they'll look at whatever they believe is the best evidence and kind of go from there. So we've talked to some of the different, we're kind of part of a coalition, cannabis coalition, and talked, with like Blake from Zion, who's great. Basically just, how that process goes with lawmakers and legislators, and it almost feels like some of them are trying to take away some of the conditions that they don't believe, are
I think there's actually more discussion on taking things away.
Yeah. I know autism was the
new ones than there is appetite for new conditions.
Correct. Yeah, that's what it feels like,
Wait.
which is a bummer, you know.
What? Because I know you've said PTSD, Tim, but I didn't know there were others.
PTSD. The Alzheimer's one, I think, comes up now and then.
Oh, gosh. Just
Right,
let the Alzheimer's people have it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Chances are it's the last.
The terminal illness, these rare conditions, HIV, these are things where, boy, if you have those diagnoses, you could do what you want.
Let them live a better quality life.
Right, like that's my opinion. I do like that it's medical because and again, to the pharmacist point, having you there to guide people on what to buy, what to use, how to use it. I just think people have such a better experience when they get better education than, hey, I think this might help. I looked up a little bit online. I run down to the dispensary and Dinosaur, I get something and I go home and try it. That, I think there's evidence to say that doesn't work as well as the system we have now. Everybody's going to disagree. There's going to be a bunch of people that disagree with me on this, Chris. But
yeah. Well, it's important to recognize, everybody that has their medical card in Utah is a medical patient. People's experiences getting that medical, to the medical card. Some patients have been recreationally using for a long time, and now are finding, a qualifying condition to fit the bill. A lot of patients are, brand new to cannabis, and so, and that was kind of my takeaway again from school is they said they're like, we believe that it would be awesome if there's a pharmacist dispensing cannabis everywhere because. You get to, even for recreational patients, you get to talk about, okay, let's just make sure it's safe, or let's find, is there a better way you can be using this, or a safer way, or, whatever that could be. But, we kind of have that background on providing quick education to patients, trying to take things that are sometimes hard to understand and making them easy to, to understand.
What do you think one of the things you have adjusted your opinion is? Because you've been doing this 10 months. Right. And I know in my experience with patients, my education has changed a little bit. It's morphed into something different. I talk about dosing a little bit different. I talk about consumption a little different. Overall use, how much people are using. My views have kind of evolved a little bit, even in the short time that we've been doing it. How's that happen for you?
What I've been most impressed with and happy with is that, again, we're staffed with, I think we usually have 3 pharmacists on staff at all times. That gives us the ability to talk to returning patients, to still continue education on each visit. One thing that I've kind of noticed is in cannabis world, patients at the regular pharmacy, they'll come in once a month, maybe twice a month if their stuff isn't on schedule. Cannabis patients come in all the time. They'll come in weekly, every few days. Some patients, buy their whole allotment up front. But how I kind of started my approach to cannabis education is I would kind of, without trying to overload patients, I would give them a whole bunch of information up front and say, I know it's a lot of information. Try to take some notes and let us know how you're doing. My approach now is a little bit more, let's introduce you to something, find you something that's safe, take notes on how you use it, but come back, and because you're going to come back next week. Let's follow up. Let's see how it's working for you. Let's, so I try to make it more of a journey with patients rather than kind of, this is the one time you're going to meet with me, so here's everything you need to know.
What are some of what products are people using a lot of that that you see down in Lehi at your location? I mean, are people getting a lot of raw flower? Are they getting a lot of carts, concentrate? What do you got? Or what do you guys have? I mean, different down there? Anything?
So Curaleaf, the Select cartridges vape cartridges, is essentially a Curaleaf product.
Yeah.
So we do have some things that are made in lab that are, Curaleaf branded things that we try to still get out to other places. But there's kind of 2 patients that we'll see. Patients that use the raw flower, and they'll vape that. They'll vape that.
As you put air quotes in there. Some we try to get people to vape it.
Right. Yeah. There's got to be an understanding of the culture, where people are coming from and how Utah's legalized it. Right. And so, we try to be understanding and talk to them openly about, that. But yeah, so the patients that like flower products tend to stick mostly with flower products. Sometimes they'll dabble with, like an edible product or something. And then there's patients who basically stay away completely from flower, whether that's for, smell purposes or, discretion, whatever it may be. But yeah, so, most commonly, for patients, usually vape cartridges and the gelatinous,
Sure.
the gummies. So
I was just curious if there was, more of carts or more of this.
Yeah,
or that,
more non-flower in Utah County or at the point of the mountain.
Because my brother has a vape shop in Pleasant Grove.
Oh, cool.
And he's just said, how popular vaping is in Utah County, just because people don't like that cigarette smell, right? So I just was curious.
Yeah.
Similarities there with that weed smell, really,
Yeah.
Yeah, you think you sell more vape carts and
We do.
concentrates than you do flower.
We do. In fact, I just looked at a percentage breakdown of all of our products this morning. So yeah, it was like 40-something% edibles, 5% vape carts, 20% flower. I think that's partly due just because there's still, even after a year or, a year plus, there still always seems to be a shortage of flower products.
Do you run out of flower still?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
See, and that goes back to you were mentioning how cannabis patients, compared to regular pharmacy patients, they, some come in quite often and some, less often, so on and so forth. But I find I've had to go in more often because of availability.
Right. And
in an
being
ideal
able
world,
to, only being able to purchase like an eighth at a time, right?
In an ideal world, I would rather go in less often. I would rather go in, say, once a month. But I found because of availability, I have to go in more often.
Understand. Yeah, as of recording today, our company doesn't have a purchase restriction policy, and so it's as long as you're within your QMP's recommendation, you can buy as much flower product as you want. I know that's changed
As long as it's available.
Correct.
Right. So do you think so that's different than some of the pharmacies?
I think,
some of the
than
pharmacies
most.
you can only buy a quarter or 2/8. Sometimes they were down to 1/8. I remember when Dragonfly was just letting people have an eighth of flower and that was it. That's all you could buy. But do you think that lack of restriction it's good for patients in some ways, but it also helps you run out of flower a little bit sooner than some of the other dispensaries?
Yeah, it is a challenge because we'll look at what menu and availability at kind of all the other shops and it does seem like we'll get a lot of things in and then it lasts a week, and so it's great for the patients that happen to come by that week or. As soon as something's available, we'll get 30 phone calls oh, it's not, is this available? I'm on my way.
Do you do drive-through?
We don't do drive-through yet. We have Del Taco's drive-through ready to go. But no, there was actually a Lehi ordinance when we opened up. I think there was a lot of fear or something. So drive-through is one of the things that they excluded from our operating plan.
Oh, okay.
And we've met with some of the Lehi officials, and they're much more
They're like,
you didn't bring hell to Lehi, to Utah County. So that's something that's probably coming. If it's going to be soon, probably maybe a couple months. Would be my guess. We have online orders that patients can submit their orders online and come down. We have a register that's set up specifically for that, so they can come right in and if there's a line, they can
skip the line and use. Do you take Hyper?
We don't. Yeah,
so it's
right now it's cash
right
only.
now it's cash only.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for all listeners, there's no ATM on site, and so
so where do you send them?
Maverick, that's next
really?
door. Yeah.
But the guy who owns that ATM, he knows.
Oh yeah.
He's like, I'll put
every
cash
time we
in
go
there
every time we go to Maverick, they're like, why do we have so many people using our ATM now?
Got it.
Yeah.
So any plans to get an ATM?
Not currently that we've been informed with. They've had multiple attempts at getting debit card readers, working with some of the local banks. So I think that's going to be priority still.
Right.
Is finding a way for people to use their card that they would use at an ATM just to use it on site.
Right.
Where do you see yourself going, within the cannabis industry? I mean, would you like to just stay a pharmacist? Would you like to get into any other aspects of the industry, or are you okay with where you're at?
One, I love where I'm at. Curaleaf's been supportive of, kind of molding the position for kind of whatever's needs are. So I've loved, staffing pharmacists. I've loved being part of, making sure inventories are good and building operating plans. As far as, with the cannabis industry, it's hard to say, because in a lot of other states, pharmacists, it's not a role. And so, for pursuing further, type career, it's hard to say what, a pharmacist opportunity would be. But I love that it's here in Utah, and I hope that it's here to stay at least, while Utah remains medical,
That leads me to, we get a lot of people listening that want jobs at the industry. I hear this every time I visit pharmacies. Are you hiring? Are you doing this? Are you guys hiring on anything? Any kind of just bud tenders or whatever?
So we currently have, I think, one full-time position that's looking to be filled.
Okay.
But because, again, movement within the company, so we've got a new store manager is going to open up an assistant manager position. If we hire internally, that'll open up a full-time position. We move up.
So there's always stuff.
Yeah, there's always things. So I think we usually take resumes. We'll usually have people apply online because they put the postings on Indeed and Glassdoor, some of them. But yeah, we do hire pretty frequently. So
just curious.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk to him about, Tim? Anything else you want to ask him why we got him? Why we got the mics are hot? Anything you want to talk about, man? Greg, anything?
What's your favorite strain?
Yeah, have you used cannabis yet?
Let's talk about
used cannabis?
So I'm a medical card holder here in Utah. I went from, having no experience with cannabis other than learning about it in school. I didn't have plans necessarily to become a card holder because, again, I just assumed by using cannabis I would be high, and so when we opened and I started talking to patients about their personal experience and, hey, wait a minute, I get migraines all the time, or after I play basketball, my foot's in pain for multiple days afterwards. Maybe I can find something for that. So I did. I got my card. I've tried a little bit. I've tried a couple of the vape cartridges. I vape flower maybe a few times, edibles a couple times. So I use it maybe once or twice a week or something like that.
And you find it to help?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I still have yet to really find how personally for if I can catch a migraine in the moment, and this is a lot of our education is what's going to work fast and what's going to be helpful for you in that moment, or if you're looking for something quick to work, or if you're looking for something to for chronic pain lasting you throughout the day. That's
you ever tried the creams for if you get I get big knots in my neck, man, just for migraine type stuff with that. Stress knots.
I usually use the cream for again topical after playing basketball. And putting it on the neck for migraines and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it helps.
I find it helps too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so it's been all good experiences. I think, like I said earlier, just doing the best with the information that you have, learning about the safety of this medication and why it's still classified as a Schedule 1. Basically no medical use. And seeing how much it's helping people and how safe really, even more so than a lot of pharmaceuticals, has definitely helped change my perspective on it. I would say being, having worked in the store and being okay, here's all of these things that patients love. And it definitely intrigued me, to get my card more than had I just, been meeting with a doctor who recommended
You feel
it.
like that's helped you, that experience of use has helped you explain it better to patients, or...
Yeah.
You can kind of learn it. You can do both. Do you think it's no, you have to have a relationship with cannabis in order to be a pharmacist, or you could, not be a consumer of cannabis and still give good education. I don't know. What's your opinion about that?
Part of the reason I got my card was because for so many patients, it is experience-based. So that's, part of, again, why I was hey, I fit, these criteria. So that's what kind of piqued my interest. I don't believe that you have to use the product similar to any other medication. Pharmacists, we can do a whole bunch of education on stuff that we've never tried before. Probably most things we've never tried before. And I make sure that, when we hire staff, that's very clear to them that by no means do you need to be a medical patient in order to provide, good education. So I make that very clear up front. Yeah. I think it's been beneficial because I can speak a little bit to, how fast something will work and what that will feel like, or if you do something that's too much, or, what you can kind of do to help, alleviate some of those things. And so that's kind of our ongoing communication with patients, are just, helping things like that.
Really, really cool. It's cool to hear stories about super conservative LDS people who get introduced to the cannabis space, get involved in it. It helps legitimize it as medicine. It helps everybody else that's around you and around the people that you talk to legitimize it. It's a big deal in Utah, especially, to have your type of person involved in this.
I hope so. And
I love that.
Yeah, and that's really why we came back. I feel like being in Colorado, We learned a lot of things, and I was like, you know what, I want to, if there's anything I can bring back home, like, I think that's awesome. We want to make, you know, Utah and our community as great as we can, and so whatever we can help provide, you know, we do so.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you know your address off the top of your head? Curaleaf's address?
Yeah, so we're 3633 North Thanksgiving Way in Lehi.
Right off that first Lehi exit, right?
Yep. So, yeah, if you're coming from Salt Lake County, it's going to be the first Lehi exit on your right-hand side. You get off the exit, it's going to put you right at the Maverick. That's, you know, where you'll want to stop to get your cash.
And do you know that with the website, because if you go to curaleaf.com, that probably takes you to the main one. I guess then what would you select, Utah, to see the menu and everything in there?
Yeah. So I usually just Google, you know, search like Curaleaf Lehi.
Yeah. Okay.
It usually works well, and it usually links you to our menu. I've had some experiences where somebody's like, "Hey, I'm here for my online stuff." I'm like, you know, we didn't, and they're buying a whole bunch of stuff we don't have. So yeah, they definitely put their menu, you know, their order in like Pennsylvania or something.
Oh, whoops!
Sitting out there waiting, they're like, "Well,
I'm here for my online."
Yeah,
you're not in the right state.
Yeah, so yeah, do double check. Most of the time, it works pretty well, but sometimes it does link you randomly to like an out of state place. So
very cool. Well, thanks for doing the podcast with us, man.
Yeah,
thank you so
great.
much.
Yeah,
it's been awesome to have you on the show and find out about Curaleaf, your products, and like Tim says, kind of, you know, your story's a little different than some, but even though it's kind of the story of a lot of people we're bringing through here these days,
it really is.
Seems like it's. Otherwise, for people listening, you can subscribe to the podcast in any podcast app that you listen to podcasts in, and UtahMarijuana.org is the hub. That's the main website for everything. So head on over there and check everything out. And
if you have any questions for Chris or I, don't hesitate to reach out. We are involved in the community now up at WB's and these weed socials. We're going to events and recording, so stay tuned.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everybody, stay safe out there.